Welcome, fans, to another edition of the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, no gimmicks guy. Today, we have a legend on the program. One of the real interesting interviews I've looked forward to, being a big fan and historian of the territorial era in the United States and Canada of professional wrestling. And this is a man who certainly made his mark in multiple territories. When I talk multiple territories as a sampling, Central States, Georgia, Pacific Northwest, Japan, and a few others in there that we'll get to. And I am speaking about none other than Mr. Jerry Oates. Jerry, thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Wanted to start off to give the fans a baseline as to your career. When you were growing up, were you a fan of the business? And if so, did you follow any particular territories?
Absolutely. When I first started, I used to go to the matches here in Columbus, Georgia, when I was a kid. I mean, 4, 5, 6, 7, years old. We went to the matches, and I was just intrigued by then. And then when the TV we got then was out of Chicago. There was no local TVs or anything like that. And I used to watch it, guys like Don Eagle, those guys. I just can't remember all who I used to see, but it was out of Chicago. And then later on, each territory started getting their own TVs and stuff like that.
Was there a particular moment in time where you thought to yourself, I really want to pursue this as a career, or how did you begin that first step into the business?
Okay, that's very good question. Back when I started, it was very hard to get in. I mean, it was just hard. And so I think I was 12 years old, and my sister married a professional wrestler. Mm. So that kind of opened the door. And as things went on, when I got in high school, I got on the wrestling team there. And I just fell in love with it, amateur wrestling. We weren't very good because a bunch of us guys, my school didn't have it. We convinced one of the coaches to get a wrestling team started. He said, I don't know anything about wrestling. So we did, and we weren't good. And then, that was my sophomore year. Then I wrestled my junior year and senior year. And then when I graduated, I figured, when I was a senior in high school, I said, what I really want to do? What do I want to do? I was gifted. I'm not bragging, but I was a gifted athlete as a kid. I played baseball. That was my first love, baseball. And I was a catcher. And I made the all-star teams and stuff like that. And I loved it. And then after I got out of the 7th grade, when I was in the 7th grade, I was playing 2 games a day. And my Little League coach didn't like it. I was a catcher for my softball team. Then he dropped me off to play my Little League game. So, I was playing 2 games a day. And it didn't bother me. I loved it. I loved doing what I was doing. And then when I got to in the 8th grade, I started playing football. Then I got a cold, just got sick and run down. And then it went to my kidneys, the infection. And then I had something called nephritis. I'd never heard of it, So my mother, it was on a Sunday morning. My mother took me to our pediatrician. And he said something's wrong with his kidneys. So they took a urine sample and blah, blah, blah. Sure enough, I had nephritis. I had to go to bed for 7 weeks.
Oh, my.
Could not get up. Couldn't do nothing. Just go to the restroom, come back to bed. For the first 2 weeks, I could only have 2 pieces of dry toast every 24 hours. Then it increased. But then that was in my growing stage. And so I got over that, took a year. I couldn't run. I couldn't do anything. And they didn't want it to turn into a chronic situation, So I tried out for the Babe Ruth team. I made it. But the coach we had, he had us doing a lot of running. And I just wasn't in shape. And so I got a uniform, and I played 1 or 2 games. And I told him, I said, Coach, I'd gotten over this long illness. And I said, I just can't run as much as the other guys. I can run, but I just can't keep up with them. He said, if you can't run, bring me my uniform. I took him his uniform, never played again. And that broke and I didn't even try to play in high school after that. That broke my heart. But I knew I had some athletic ability. And so I said, what I want to do, I don't want to go work with a telephone company. Nothing wrong with that. Those were great jobs back in the day, great retirements, great benefits. But I wanted to do something different, And so I approached my brother-in-law when him and my sister came up from Orlando to Columbus for Christmas. And I told him, I said, I want you to teach me to wrestle. He said, you want me to teach you to wrestle? I said, yeah. He said, how am I going to do that? You live in Columbus, Georgia, and I live in Orlando, Florida. 3 months later, I was in Orlando.
That was Dick Steinborn, correct?
That's correct. And I know you know the history of his dad, Milo. World's strongest man back in the day, set all kind of world records. Wrestled himself, wound up being the promoter in Orlando. And that's where my brother-in-law and sister were living. He helped his dad with promotion, helping his dad run the gym and stuff like that. And he was still young in his 30s, and he had it made. And so I had been down there about 5 months, and I was going to the gym, working out. And so I asked him, I said, when you going to start training me? You know what he said? When I'm ready. He really wanted to see if I was committed to doing this, And of course, he was raised in it. But he called me one Sunday night. He said, a Sunday evening, he said, get your stuff on. I said, we're going to work out. He said, we're going to the gym. His dad had a ring in his gym. He said, we're going to the gym. We're getting in the ring for the first time. I was in heaven. And that's how it started.
Did a lot of folks have talked about, how rigorous and physically demanding the actual training was, not only the conditioning, but the in-ring work as compared to some of the processes that go on in the modern era, so to speak. Was your experience that taxing as well? Did you find it, even though you were an athlete, et cetera, did you find it to be that difficult on yourself as well?
Yeah, because there was things that, of course, I didn't know, but he, just like, you hook up, you turn, you take a guy over in the flying mare. He would do that till I went over perfect every time. He said, you got to protect your neck. You can't come straight down, he went above and beyond the little things, and we would work on one move until I had it. He would just show me a move. I know the first time he ever told me to take a backdrop. Well, I'd never taken a backdrop in my life. I said, how did I do it? He said, come running and you'll figure it out. Couldn't breathe for 2 minutes and knocked the air out of me. And he said, I said, how do you keep from knocking the air out of yourself? He said, on the way down, blow out. And when you hit, you don't have any air in you. You exhale. Instead of holding your breath, it's little. And then over the years, I used to say, I don't care who slammed me or what kind of backdrop I took or hip block, you had no air in you. You learn these little things, but he was a stickler for that. He was
you certainly were quite a technician, as that was one of the hallmarks of your career. When you were first breaking in, just wanted to get your recollection of that initial period in Florida around 70 to 71, if my research is correct.
Yeah, I started in March of 1970. I would have a few matches here, not full time, a few matches here and there. I remember the first match I ever had. I was in Fort Myers, Florida. Of course, my brother-in-law was on the card, and I wrestled Duke Kiyomuka. And I didn't even remember walking to this day. I was so nervous. I didn't even remember walking to the ring. I got in there, and it was okay. But on the way home, he told me everything I did wrong, not what I did right. You should have done this when he did that. Stuff like that. And all through as I was learning more and more, that's what he would do with me. And then I got to being booked more, like a couple of 3 times a week. Just I just didn't start full-time cold turkey, which I'm glad, Then sometimes I would go to Tampa and referee, and then be in the main event with like Murdoch and Rose started a little ahead of me. They would be in there with, say, Jose Lothario and Hiro Matsuda. And I'm in there with main eventers watching this. It's fast, and you learn that way, So I started from the ground up, even though I had a brother-in-law in the business. But Florida was a great place to learn. Briscoe hadn't been in the business. He might have been in the business a couple of years ahead of me. Bob Roop had just come out of the Olympics. Matsuda was there. Jose Lothario was there. I mean, Dale Lewis was there, who'd been to the Olympics. And I got to wrestle all these guys. Ronnie Garvin was there. I used to wrestle Ronnie a lot, and learn. And they knew I was green, and they helped me, and they knew I was sincere. No cocky attitude, because my brother-in-law was a wrestler. That had nothing to do with me, That I was on my own, because I knew I wouldn't be with him my whole career, So, but I broke in at a good place and at a good time, because they were doing unbelievable business. Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Jack Briscoe, because I was going to ask you about the experience. What jumped out at me was in '73. You're very new in your career. You wrestled him on Georgia TV, and then of course later in Central States. What was that experience like, getting in there with a master like Briscoe on TV at that stage of your game?
So he had just won the title. It was horrified. I mean, he was a great guy, but his reputation preceded him no matter where he went. Nobody in the business fooled with him. I mean, he was a great guy, but he was the type guy, he was two-time NCAA heavyweight champion from Oklahoma State, never defeated. He was good with his fists. He was good on the mat. He could take it. But he was a professional. I mean, he gave me a match, and then the first time I wrestled him for the title was in St. Joe, Missouri in 1974. Went an hour with him, and I was exhausted. I mean, here I am, been in the business 3 years, wrestling the world champion for for a title. I mean, that was an honor to me, And I thanked him for it. I mean, he didn't guzzle me, he didn't eat me up, But we had I thought, a great match.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to Dusty and Dickie Murdoch. You mentioned that you were, and they were already casting a big shadow in Florida at the time, and you were around them. Some folks said that they weren't the kindest at times to rookies breaking in, but wanted to know what in that period, because I know you had a lot to do with Murdoch later on, but in that particular period when you were green, what they were, how you found them with you.
Well, I didn't notice anything about them. I'll tell you this about what I was told by my brother-in-law's dad, Milo. I had a job in Orlando, Florida, and my sister called me and said, I worked on a Saturday from like 8 to 12. She said, when you get off, said, Milo wants you to come over there and rake his yard. I said, okay. I was in awe of Milo Steinborn. He had this gym, and it was like a museum of all the stuff and the places he'd been in the world, pictures and those round silver barbells that nobody could use. They used to pour the shot in there. That stuff he had back in the day. And I'm going, God, I've never seen nothing like that. So I go over there, and she said he'll have the rake leaning up against his house in the front yard. So he just wanted to get me over and talk to me. So I'm out there raking his yard, and here he comes. He was still big and thick. He always took care of himself. He said, let me ask you, in this strong German accent, he still had that strong German accent. He said, let me ask you a question. He said, why do you want to get into business, wrestling business? I said, Mr. Steinborn, it's something I've wanted since I was very young. And I said, there's something I really want to do. And I said, I think I'll be good at it. He said, I'm going to give you one piece of advice, and I'm telling you this today, and this was in 1969. He told me this. He said, keep your mouth shut. Don't be like Dick. Dick was always argue about matches, money, trips. He said, don't be like, and I remember that talking to you today. I remember, And I always kept my mouth shut, you know. But you know, I've seen a lot of. I've trained some guys over the years, and I always tell guys, when you go in a dressing room and you're just breaking in, don't go in there and try to impress anybody. You, first of all, you don't know who you're talking to. And these are guys that have been around. They don't want to hear your nonsense, you know, what you did in high school and all that kind of stuff. It's a business. And a lot of guys in my day didn't take it as a business. I did. That's the way I fed my family. It was a business to me. It's the way I earned my living, you know. So I took it dead serious. So, you know, Murdoch and Rhodes, they were wild now. They were wild. I'm telling you, they were wild. But I got along with them.
In terms of you know, legends, and we're going to talk about many here. We already have, and going to talk about many more. You shared the ring several times during your career with Andre the Giant. You know, not only in terms of battle royal situations, but also you team with them,
right,
for a couple of shots. What was that experience like? Given how Andre was at the peak of his drawing power, probably the peak of his physical stature, and was such an attraction.
The first time I ever saw him and met him was in 1973 in Houston, Texas. I walk in the dressing room. There's Andre the Giant, Ernie Ladd, Blackjack Mulligan, Blackjack Lanza, Wahoo McDaniel. I'm going, these are the monsters of our back then. I mean, they were all very nice, very nice. Andre, I said, God, this guy, you know, heard of him, of course, but I never met him. And then over the years, I'd see him, you know, maybe once or twice a year. He got bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, he traveled with me. I had a van when I was in Louisiana, and he'd always want to travel with me, you know, where he had plenty of room. And a lot of guys didn't want to haul him. He was so big, but I didn't care, you know. Because, you know, he would fly in. He never had a car in any place he ever went, you know. So, yeah, he was a nice, but if he didn't like you, he didn't like you. And, you know, I felt sorry for him, you know. No matter where we would stop to eat, it was like a freak show. You know, people would come up gawking. I mean, you can't blame people. You've never seen anybody like that, you know. His hands look like baseball gloves, you know, his feet. I know one night here in Columbus, he was here. This was years later. So he was in the restroom. He wore a sport coat, and he wore cowboy boots. He had to have all this stuff handmade, you know. So he's in the restroom. So I go over there and get his coat and put it on. Sport coat. Well, the bottom of the coat came down past my boots, and you can't see my hands, and the shoulders are out like this. And I put his cowboy boots on with my wrestling boots on.
Wow.
That's how big is. I thought it might have been Bill Drummore or Bob Armstrong. They said, and I was standing in the door when he's going to walk out. They said, he's going to kill you. I said, he ain't going to say nothing to me. So he opened the door. He looked me up and down. He went, ho, 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 ho. And I went and took the stuff off and don't get back. But there was a lot of guys he didn't like. You know, I mean, he just didn't like. Like anybody else, you know, but he could, you know, he was a good guy. I got along with him well.
You, with a number of partners, including Steve Kern, had some real epic tilts with the Minnesota Wrecking Crew of Gene and Ole Anderson. Brad Anderson is a friend of mine. We're going to be debuting a show on this network with Brad, looking at famous families in wrestling soon. But I've heard a lot about Gene and Ole and how they worked in the ring. But do you have memories of those matches that stand out, and any with respect to Ole later when he had the book in Georgia?
Yes. I even teamed with Ole some, not much, but some. Yeah, I remember those matches. I mean, especially later on when my brother and I were in the Carolinas, working with a lot with Gene and Rene Goulet, or Gene and Sweet Hansen. But yeah, I mean, you learned a lot with those guys. I mean, Gene was he was very, very good. He would, and they didn't guzzle you, even though you're kind of green, they took care of you, and that's the way you learn. You can only learn by guys that are more experienced and, been in the business longer than you. That's the way you learn, and you learned a lot with them. Learned a lot.
What was Ole like later on when, of course, Ole, a legend that we've lost, God rest his soul, was a polarizing figure, to say the least. A lot of guys were, disenfranchised with Ole when he was booking. What was your experience like with him outside of the ring in that respect?
I'm glad you asked me that question. I talked to Bill Watts yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Guys did not like working for Bill Watts. Guys did not like working for Ole. You know that. You've heard that. But I love every minute of working with both of them. If you call Bill Watts today, he'll tell you. I told him that about 6 months ago. We talked about an hour, how we wish we could do it all over again. And I said, Bill, guys didn't like working for you. I said, yeah. He said, I know that. I said, you know why? I said, you ran it like a business. It was a business. And it was. It is. Well, it was. I mean, that you think about, you're in towns every week, same towns every week. And you got to know what you're doing. And, Bill didn't put up with coming in smoked up, drunk, late, none of that. He did not put up with it. He told me, Bill Watts told me, I'm getting off of Ole right now on the Bill.
Go ahead. Feel free.
But he told me, Bill told me yesterday, he said, I ran into Brody, he said, of course, before the Puerto Rican situation at an airport. He said, I don't remember where I was going. We just passed each other in the airport. And he said, Brody came up to him and said, why don't you use me anymore, Bill? He said, I can't trust you. He said, your word is no good anymore. He said, you've no-showed promoters around the country. You're on top on the main event and you no-show. He said, I'll buy you lunch, but you'll never work for me again. Mm-hmm. But getting back to Ole was the same way. No nonsense. I never had Bill Watts holler at me, scream at me. I never had Ole holler at me, scream at me. You know why? I did what I was asked to do. Mm-hmm. They were the boss. There has to be a boss. Mm-hmm. There, even in the business, there were cliques. If a certain booker was buddies with somebody that shouldn't be on top, and that's going to be in anything, But I did what I was asked to do.
Yeah, a professional.
But I enjoyed working for both of them. I'm being honest with you. You knew where you stood all the time. If you did what you was asked to do, you got no issue. But I've seen them both scream and holler at guys that didn't do what they were supposed to do or what they were asked to do, or coming in late. Well, Bill got where he'd find you. The first night in the Territorial, I went to Louisiana. I did 2 TVs that Saturday. That was my first week in the Territory. Went to Pine Bluff, Arkansas that night. It was on a Saturday. Kim Patero walked in. As soon as he walked in the door, Watts told him, don't think about unpacking your bag. He said, you're done. He said, what do you mean I'm done? He said, you missed the New Orleans show on Thanksgiving night, Thursday night. Now, this is Saturday. He said, well, I went home for Thanksgiving. He said, you didn't tell me. You're done. Ken turned around and walked. I said, this guy just fired an Olympic champion. What's he going to do to me? But I enjoyed every minute working for Bill Watts.
Yeah.
And Ole. Guys that didn't like working for him, that was their problem. They were the cause of it. Ole and Bill Watts ran it the way it should have been run, a business. And that's the way they ran it. And they were very successful at it, as you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. A fan is asking, Anthony saying, Jerry, you've wrestled around the country. What is your favorite region of the country to wrestle in terms of fan interactions? The Southeast, Southwest, Pacific Northwest, Northeast, or Midwest, if you have to pick one.
I love wrestling in Oregon. I loved it out there. Don Owens was a good pay man. When I got out there was good talent. Buddy Rose was there. Ed Wiskowski, Snooker was there. Jesse Ventura was there. It was a good crew. Ricky Hunter was there. Dale Lewis was there. Dale Russell, some, not a lot. But it was a great territory. It really was. They ran it like a business. Mm-hmm. We wrestled in state of Washington and Oregon, of course, but all over the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, I enjoyed it out there. I wasn't out there long, but because I got a call, they wanted me to come to Charlotte. That's when Charlotte was on fire, and I had to make a choice. I'd only been out there 6 months, but anyhow, I enjoyed it very much. I really did.
Yeah, and I've definitely got questions about your time working for Don. But first, I've got to ask you about your very successful team with Ted in Central States and Georgia. And a fan sent me a question on social media, and they specifically wanted to know about your program with Dutch Mantell and Ron Bass.
Yeah, my brother and I, we teamed up early on over in Alabama for a short stint. And then I came back to Georgia, and that's just as I came back to Georgia. I had wrestled here a short time, and that's when they had the split with Gunkel. You know, there was a split. So, of course, I lived here in Columbus. My brother lived here in Columbus. But the girl I was married to, her father was a promoter in Savannah, Georgia. All right. So he promoted Savannah, Waycross, Georgia, Statesboro, Georgia, ran spot shows over on the East Coast, like Fred Ward did on the west side of Georgia. So when I came back, Gunkel had just died, like 4 or 5 days before I came back. Now there's a split. So my brother-in-law and Ernesto and Jody Hamilton and the whole crew went with Ann. Now, the original office has got no talent. That's when I think Lester Welch bought it. I think Lester bought it. And so when I came back, I was now booked with Gunkel. So I wrestled with them a couple of 3 nights. So the promoter here, Fred Ward, who I'd known since I was a child, and my brother later married his granddaughter, Fred Ward's granddaughter. And so now I'm married to a girl, her dad's promoter, and he's back with the original office. So I leave Gunkel and go back to the original office. And that's when they had to bring in talent. Only guy that stayed with the original office was Bob Armstrong, the only one. And then they brought it and started, Eddie Graham came up here, you know, twinkling of an eye. A lot of guys came out of Florida, but a lot of people, you know, it was like a new territory starting up with new faces. A lot of people did, but it went on for a couple of years. So my brother and I, he stayed with Gunkel to the very end, but I went to Kansas City. Bill Watson was doing the booking here in Georgia. And so I left here and went to Kansas City, and I was out there about 3 months, and they teamed me up with Mike George. And then Harley Race told me, he said, we go get your brother out of here. We go send him to Kansas City right before Gunkel folds. We'll get him booked out there because, you know, Harley had a piece of that out there. So they got my brother to come out there, and then they eventually teamed us up. And we had a heck of a run out there with Ken Raby and the interns and Bass and Cowan. And we did really well. So while we were there, Jesse Ventura came in out of Minneapolis. Eddie Sharkey had trained him. He was broke as a church mouse. We walked in the dressing room, there's this guy laying on the table. We don't know him. He said, introduced himself as Jesse Ventura, and then he was green as grass, and I had some matches with him, my brother, and he hung around out there for a while. We hauled him around, didn't charge him any trams to ride with us, you know. We became friends with him, you know. Then he left there and he went to Oregon. But so my brother and I leave there and come back to Georgia. And we did well again. My brother and I always had issues outside of the ring, not in the ring. My brother was talented, very good piece of talent, but outside the ring, we had issues. He had women problems and divorces. And that affected things we needed to do. So we're here in Georgia, and we became the Georgia Tag Team Champions. We were wrestling Les Thornton and Tony Charles, Gordman and Goliath, and whoever else, you know. So I get a phone call from Barnett. I'd just had my first knee surgery in 1976. And it was 9 weeks before we were supposed to go to Japan. So he said, Dory Jr. said they want you and your brother in Japan. I said, okay. I said, I'll be ready. That's before they did the scope, but I made it. So we go to Japan and we come back. I went to Korea for 5 days. My brother, he screwed that deal up in Japan because he's going to fly his wife to Hawaii. I said, look, another week, what's the difference? We call them at home, tell them we're going to be a week late. They don't care. We're going to go to Korea, get this money, and come on home. Well, he didn't go. So I went. It was we were the All Asian Tag Team Champions. They wanted me and him as the champions to go there, and Abdullah was going to be the single. Well, he decided he didn't want to go. So they sent Johnny Gray, a kid from Australia, in his place, and they teamed Butcher and I up. That's not what they wanted, but that's what they got, you know. But my brother never went back to Japan. They never mentioned him again. So we come back. He's back a week before me. He meets me at the airport. I get off the plane. First thing he says, we ain't got a job. I said, what? He said, Barnett fired us. But while we were gone, he replaced Ernesto with Ole as the booker. So I said, you're kidding. He said, no, but he said, his father-in-law was married to Ralph Freed's daughter. Ralph Freed was married to Fred Ward's daughter, who was a promoter. He helped him with the business. He said, Ralph said, call him in the morning. Watson wants you to call him. He wants you in Louisiana. I said, that's out. I ain't going out there. That is out. I mean, I just got home. I mean, from South Korea all the way back home, and then I get hit with this. I said, let me get some rest here, man. So anyhow, that's what I did. I called Watson. We talked it over, and he flew me out on a Friday evening after I got home on a Tuesday. But anyhow, we're going back. But later on down the road, we had those reunion in Dothan, Alabama. So my son and Leon Ogle, who was married to Fred Ward's daughter, we go down to the reunion. Ole's there. And I asked Ole, I said, let me ask you something. I said, when you took over the book in 77, how come you fired me and my brother? He said, I didn't fire you. I said, well, Barnett told me that things were going to be great for us when we got back. He said, your names were not on the booking sheets. Those Barnett's where he didn't want me here or my brother with a connection on each side of the state with promoters. That's the only thing I can figure. Because we were doing great. So that was another story.
In terms of wrestling at the Chase, the TV show, could you give the fans, the younger fans, an idea of just how popular a program that was that you were on, of course, many times?
At the Chase, that was almost like a house show. We did 3 tapings. It was like a house show. I mean, they were fired up. They were just, you would think it was a house show, but it was TV. But I mean, the response was unbelievable. Everything was good. Larry Manizak was great on the mic. It was a great setup. It was a great setup. It was as lively as anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, and incredible ratings that will never likely happen again per capita households.
No,
similar to Memphis. Yeah. A fan on social media asked about working with Bobby Heenan inside and what he was like outside of the ring.
I only wrestled Bobby, a couple of times. I think one of the times was in St. Louis, and I was in shock. He was unbelievable.
Mm.
He was unbelievable. Took unbelievable, crazy bumps. He was always right there. His timing was unbelievable. He just wasn't a big guy, but he was very good and excellent on the horn. He was fantastic. But to wrestle him, he was awesome. He really was. He really was.
Were you surprised when he was picked up by Vince there and became, arguably, maybe not so much of an argument, the greatest manager of all time?
That didn't shock me. I mean, he come off the wall stuff. I mean, I don't even think he knew what he was going to say till he said it. I mean, he was always right there on point. Everything he said, every time. Just he could talk. I mean, that's what made him. He could talk. He could talk.
You mentioned previously Harley Race. I wanted to ask you about your memories of wrestling him for the prestigious Missouri title and later the NWA World title.
Yeah, that was a main event. I was on the main event. I think this is the one you're talking about. I was on the main event with him in St. Louis. It was a double main event. It was him, he and I, and the other main event, I think it was Murdoch and Bruno. That's the first time I ever met Bruno. Everybody in the business, he was the nicest, kindest man. I walked up, he was in the hallway there at the Keel. And I said, God, that's Bruno, dressed, in a sport coat. And I walked down the hall and I introduced myself. And I said, I just wanted to meet you. I said, I'm Jerry Oates. I just wanted to introduce myself. He said, well, I've heard of you. Whether he had or not, I don't know. I said, I just wanted to say hello to you and meet you. He said, it's nice to meet you. He said, where was I from? Just nice a man as you want to be. Just a super guy. Just a super guy. But the matches I had in Louisiana with Harley were unbelievable. 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 I know I was a North American heavyweight champion, and I get to TV there in Shreveport. I see the card written out, what the matches are for TV, like the fourth match. It said Oates and Race. I said, well, they got me with him. So referee matches are started, and they said, Bill wants to see you down the hall in one of these rooms. I said, okay. So I go down there. Harley's in there. And when Harley comes back around, I'm going to be wrestling him. Right? Oklahoma, Louisiana, Shreveport, New Orleans, everywhere. And Bill said, I got you and Harley together. That's okay. And he said, we're going to figure something out. And Harley said, I've already got it figured out. He said, he's getting his hand raised. Well, I said, what? He said, he's going to get his hand raised. He said, I'm coming back in 2 weeks, so I want to make some money. So we go out there and we're up and down, back and forth, back and forth. He did something to me, boom, boom, boom. He slammed me, boom, goes to the top rope, does a cross body block off the top rope, I hook him, roll low on top of him, 1, 2, 3. That studio went absolutely berserk. They went crazy. I just beat the world champion on TV, 1, 2, 3. Then he came back around, we did big business because everybody knew I could beat him. Well, I did beat him, and it was business. Business. If you want to make money, it had to be business. It's not a one-sided street. Go in there and eat somebody up and gone, come back. Well, what does that mean? So Vince McMahon thought he did something great when he called it sports entertainment, WWE. All sports are nothing but entertainment. Baseball, football, basketball, golf, auto racing. It's a relief for people. They come and they enjoy it. They get excited. They're happy or mad, and they go home. We entertain people about wrestling. That's the way I looked at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to ask you about Vince in a bit, and the impact of that national expansion on you in particular. Another legend that you had multiple matches with, including some of the Texas death variety, is Terry Funk.
Yeah.
You must have some fond recollection of those.
Yeah, I know the first time, if I can back up and tell you the first time I met Terry Funk. All right, this is 1969. Dickie's working out with me, you know. So my sister, it was a Monday. My sister called me at work. She said, "What time you get off from work?" I said, 5 o'clock. She said, "This is in Orlando." She said, "Come by the house. There's somebody here I want you to meet." Well, I get to her house and I walk in there. There's Terry Funk. Terry was like 2 or 3 years older than me. God, he had this huge, gigantic neck, big, had on cowboy hat, cowboy boots. And she introduced him. She said, "This is my brother, you know, Jerry, and this is Terry Funk." He said, "You're a little wormy, aren't you?" Because Terry weighed about 255 then. He's young, you know, looked good. And then later on, I had some matches with him, man. I wrestled him in Kansas City for the international heavyweight title. And the winner of this match is going to wrestle Jack Briscoe the following Thursday. So I beat him. I got the belt, international heavyweight title. I get to the building the following Thursday. Guess who I'm wrestling? Him. He beat Briscoe in Tampa the night before. In Miami. I'm sorry. He beat him in Miami. So I was the first one to wrestle Funk after he won the title. And then I wrestled him several times when you go to Japan. You know, had good matches. Terry had a little clownish to him, unlike his brother, Dory. But he was a good champion. He worked hard now. I'll give him credit. He worked hard.
Were you surprised his career lasted as long as it did, and then that run that he had in the original ECW, where he basically reinvented himself in some ways, doing the moonsaults and all that stuff?
I couldn't believe what I was saying. I can't believe you said that. I'm thinking, Terry, you're older than me, and you're out there doing backflips off the top rope, getting in barbed wire matches and fire matches. I mean, I know when Junior was the champion, Dory was the champion. Dory told me this. He had his wife with him, Dory. They're checking in Tampa at a hotel. There's a fountain in the. Have you ever heard this story?
No, but I'm waiting on the.
There's this fountain in the middle of the hotel. You know, it's got a spray and all that. Dory's up there signing in. He turns around, and Terry picked Dory's wife up and threw her in the fountain.
Oops.
In this hotel.
Oops.
Dory saw it. He walked over there, and he said, Terry knew I was hot. So he said, "You know what I did?" I said, "I got no idea." He said, "I jumped in there with her with my clothes on." He said, Junior started laughing. I mean, he do stuff like that. He was unbelievable. But I always, you know, and then when he got sick there, you know, I called him a couple of times, and then as time went by, some people said he was really bad, and I didn't call him. I didn't want to hear him say, "I don't know who you are," you know. I was close to him. I mean, we used to travel together on the bullet trains in Japan, and we'd talk, and I wrestled him in Okinawa. He bust my eardrum while we were over there. I mean, he was reckless. But you know, it breaks your heart. You know.
Big loss. Absolutely. A fan on social media wanted me to ask you about your experience wrestling Randy Savage in '77 in Georgia. It was a time limit draw, I guess.
It was here in my hometown.
Okay.
I don't even remember it.
Oh.
I've got a poster of it. I don't remember it, but I did wrestle it. I remember that, but I don't remember any. I mean, you know, I don't remember anything about the match. But he was a good worker. He worked hard. That everybody thinks their generation was, but to me, the wrestling business in the mid to late 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, talent was at a premium. Now, if you want to run some shows, there's no talent. That guys think I went to a couple of them, over the years, and some guys I trained, they got booked. After about 3 matches, I'd get up and leave. I mean, they all got on T-shirts, cut off jeans. They don't even weigh 165 pounds. I mean, the people in the stands are bigger than them. I mean, it's what we did is lost art. It takes years to get good at what you do. I mean, if you want to make a career out of it, psychology, timing, being at the right place at the right time with what you have to offer, and and how you get along with the guys and the promoters and the bookers, and it's not just one thing, And I've seen so many guys that had zero talent make a fortune. Probably who I'm talking about. But drew money. A lot of them could do this. Now, back in the day, I'm telling you, when Murdoch and Rhodes were in Florida, they had come out of Michigan when I was there, when I was starting. But Dickie could always go. I mean, I've had some matches with him that was unbelievable in Louisiana. I love working with him. But Dusty was right there with him, taking bumps, flying all over the ring, boom, boom, boom. But then he found his niche, and nobody could talk like Dusty. Nobody. I mean, he could talk. But once that thing started changing, I was there when it went south in Atlanta working. I know the first Saturday before that Black Saturday, we were there, and all of a sudden, George Scott walked in. George Scott, what's he? He was working for Vince after he left the Crockett's. We knew something was up, but we didn't know, that it was tight-lipped. And then there it went from there. But, he started getting everybody. Just say you and I are wrestling here in Georgia, and we drawing money all over Georgia. And Vince knew what he was going to do. Well, he'd call you. He said, look, I know you're in Georgia, and you and Jerry are drawing money there. And he said, look, if you come to work for me, I understand what guys like Orndorff and them told me. He told them, DiBiase and those guys that I knew. I'll make you more money than you ever dreamed of. And you think, well, let me think about it. And then you do it. Well, what he does, he calls me. Tells me the same story. But when he got where he was going to jump on everybody, when he came back to Georgia, me and you, the main eventers in Georgia, people remembered us. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He had that figured out, But he did. Orndorff said, I'm making so much money. I know they came to my hometown after they'd taken over everything. And they said Strongbow wanted to see me. And I'd known Joe Scarpa, Jay Strongbow since I was a kid. He wants you to come down to Savannah. I want to go down there. No, he wants to see you. So I went down there to the auditorium here, and he said, did you bring your stuff? I said, no, I didn't bring my stuff. I said, I didn't come down here to wrestle. Go get your stuff. We short a guy. I said, oh, come on. He said, go get your stuff. So I went and got my stuff and came back. And I was talking to Orndorff, and I had an Oates gym jacket on. That's when I had my gym, too. I had my gym, but I was still doing a lot of wrestling. I had on an Oates gym jacket, and I wore the ring. Orndorff said, I forgot my gym jacket, a ring jacket. I said, you can wear my Oates gym? He said, I'll wear it. So he wore it out to the ring. He was telling me, he said, Jerry, he said, I'm making so much money. He said, my hands shake. I mean, they were making a fortune. I was never there was no pay-per-views in my heyday or nothing. I did wrestling in the Superdome in New Orleans, but there was no pay-per-views, But I don't begrudge those guys. And, they did the right thing at the right time, I guess. I mean, if they didn't, they would be out of a job, So what do you do? Mm-hmm. That old song, you got to know when to hold them and you got to know when to fold them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly very destructive in terms of the territories, notwithstanding what people say about it being inevitable. Were you there, speaking of Black Saturday, when Ole had his discussions with Vince and or Linda that famous exchange?
I was not there. No. I met Vince McMahon one time. I went to a Arnold Classic, bodybuilding show. Les Stature and Les lived in Ohio, and I used to put on bodybuilding shows. And I'd always fly Les down to do my emceeing. He was great at it, So I flew up to Cincinnati. We went up to Columbus, Ohio, and Vince was there, and we spotted him. This is way before this. So we went up and talked to him. Told him who we were. Yeah, you guys, blah, blah, blah. NWA guys, yeah. He said, I'm just to change. He tried to change pro bodybuilding. He got into that, and lost his butt.
Yeah.
That didn't last but about a year. And the guys that went with him, they were done in the IFBB. They were done. They were done. That finished him up. And he only did that for a year. But then I think I never met his dad, but I knew guys that wrestled for him, like Stan Hansen and some of them that went up for Vince Sr. They loved him. They said, you went there on a handshake. If he brings you in, use the main eventer, he guarantees you 6 months. It's all done on a handshake. And that's the way it was. And then when your time's up, you leave. And if you did great, drew money with Bruno or whoever, you come back. They say he was a man of his word. He did exactly what he told. That's the way Bill Watts did me. When I told you I wasn't going out there, he called me, and I called him. They wanted me. He said, man, I want you to come here for me. I said, Bill, I can't come out there, man. I said, I've heard about those 3,000 a week, miles. That ain't no joke. I said, man, I can't come out there. I said, that's just too many miles. He said, look. He said, but I had wrestled for him here in Georgia. And he said, if you come out here, he said, I'll use you on top. You'll be my champion, and I'll help you with your trans, fly you whenever. He said, if you'll fly out here Saturday and this is Wednesday morning after I got home from 5 weeks overseas. He said, if you'll fly out here, he said, I'll send you a round trip ticket. I'll pick you up at the airport, come out here and do 2 tapings for me and see what you think. That's when Carl Cox was there. That's another great piece of talent. My gosh. He said, then I walked in the restroom. They looked at me. Who is he? Murdoch knew me, but some of them did and some of them didn't. So he takes me back to the airport. He said, what do you think? I said, I'll come out here for you. I started 2 weeks later. But he did. He did everything he said he was going to do. Now, I mean, he'd fly me up to Tulsa on Mondays because I lived in Shreveport. That was 350 up and 350 back. Miles. That's 700 miles first day. But he was good to me. And he treated me nice. He was good to me. And that's all I can judge you. But I can only judge you how you treat me. Not how you may treat somebody else. That's none of my business. I only go by how somebody does me. And that's the way I respond back.
Speaking of, beloved promoters, you already talked briefly about working for Don Owens up in the Pacific Northwest. I wanted to get your thoughts on Don and how he was to do business with, and then ask you about your program with Ed Wiskowski or the later Colonel De Beers to start, please.
I thought you was asking about Dutch Savage too.
I'll ask about that. Yeah.
So I was at Wrestling for Watts in Louisiana. I'm wrestling Harley in New Orleans for the world title. We get in the ring. The referee's giving us instructions. He said, Don Owens wants you in Portland, Oregon. I said, what? Well, we're getting instructions. I said, what? He said, he knows I go around and he's looking for young babyface that can work. He said, I told him about you. I said, man, I don't want to go to Portland. That's all the way across the country for me, So he said, come to my room in the morning and we'll call him. I'm like, God, I didn't sleep a wink. I said, man, I don't want to go way out there. But I've been out there for Watts for a year. And so I go down to Harley's room. We wait this 3-hour time, or 2-hour time difference from there. We call Don Owens and he, yeah, kid, I want you to come out here. I'm needing somebody, blah, 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 blah. I said, I don't know, man. I said, let me think about it a day or two. So I thought about it. I said, yeah, I've been here a year. I called him back and said, I'll go. So I said, I need 2 weeks. I said, I need 3 weeks. So I got to give Bill a 2 week notice. I just wasn't going, I didn't do business that way. I said, I got to give him a notice, and then it'll take me a week to get out there. But I flew out there and bought a brand new car when I got there. I wasn't driving that. So I stayed out there 6 months. I'm doing good. I like it. I love working for him. Had all kind of matches with Jesse. They teamed Jesse and I up. Snooker and I up. I think Jesse and I won the Pacific Northwest titles, tag titles. I was the singles champion at one time. Yes. Good talent. Snooker was there. Don was a good pay man now. I'm telling you, he'd pay you. He would pay you. He was a good pay man. He was easy to work for. Nice man, laid back gentleman. I enjoyed working there. So I get a call from my brother. I've been there 6 months, doing good. My brother called me and said, George Scott wants you to come to the Carolinas. And I said, God, I just got here, you know. I said, now you talking about me coming back across the country, you know. So I said, I don't know. He said, he's going to team us up. And Charlotte, the Carolinas was on fire. I mean, this is 1978. He said, man, they go team us up. Man, he said, we're going to make a fortune here. So I said, all right. I said, I got to give them a notice. So I gave them a notice, and I booked myself in Los Angeles because I wanted to wrestle in the Olympic Auditorium in LA. That had been a long time dream of mine. Well, I get there, Leo Garibaldi's the booker. And I've known Leo since I was a kid because him and my brother-in-law broke in the business at the same time. And I tell you something Leo told me about my brother-in-law. You've heard of Leo. You've heard of Leo, right? Leo Garibaldi, his dad, Chick Garibaldi. So I get there and get to the Olympic Auditorium. I had to go get a physical that day. You know, they got the athletic commission, all that crap. So I stayed out there a week. Stayed at the beach and working out, and because I'm heading to Charlotte. And so I get there, and he said, I want you to meet Mike LaBelle, who was a promoter. So I go and meet down there at the Olympic Auditorium and meet him. He said, we want you to stay. I'm going, God. I said, I can't. I said, I've already committed to Charlotte. They said, well, if you stay with this, and it, but business wasn't so hot, you know, talent. So I wrestled the main event that night in LA with Roddy Piper. And I hadn't seen Piper since Kansas City when he started. Been years, several years. So I went on to Charlotte, and they teamed us up, and the money was unbelievable, man. Everywhere I went, they wanted me to stay, but I don't look back. Those were decisions I made. We all, you come to the fork in the road. Which road do you take? Do I take this one or stay on this one? I probably, and then Eddie Graham, after I was working for the new office in Georgia when Gunkel was running, Eddie came in and he told me, I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you what happened in my career. Eddie told me, he said, when you leave here, I want you to come back to Florida. He said, you're the perfect size. You can work with the big ones or the smaller ones. He said, I want you to, but I didn't do that either. It just, different things happened at different times when you didn't even think about that anymore. So did I make some wrong turns? Probably. But I wouldn't change anything. I can't change it. Then I was blessed.
Absolutely. One heck of a career. Just going back to Portland for a second, I wanted to ask you about you saw a real confrontation in the dressing room between Jimmy Snuka and Dutch Savage. Could you talk about that for a minute, please?
I cannot believe you knew about that. Everybody knew about it. Snuka missed how deep into that organization Dutch was, I don't know. I think he had some piece of like Seattle, some stuff up in Washington. I'm not sure around like Portland, Eugene, Salem. Medford, Oregon. I don't know. I didn't care about all that. I was just there trying to make money and make it a living. So we know I was there. Snooker missed a shot in Seattle. He was with his girlfriend somewhere. Do you know the story?
I've heard thumbnail sketches of it, but I'd be interested in hearing all of it from you.
Dutch called his wife and told him.
Oh, yeah.
Told her. We're in Portland on Tuesday night. We get there. Jimmy's on like, I don't know, third match or something. I think Jesse and I were in a tag match. We know this has happened. The word, how it got out on everybody's like, man, when that Snooker might have quit and left and went somewhere else. But Jimmy'd been out there a while. Jimmy was a good guy. All of a sudden, that Fijian come in that dressing room. He took his shirt off. You know how he's built. You could see everything. Dutch was sitting there getting his stuff out of his bag, his trunks and boots and all that. Everybody's sitting there watching this man. That Fijian got in his face, every vein in his upper body, you could see it. His shoulders, chest, abs. He was standing there shaking, begging Dutch to get up. Begged him. Cussed him for everything you could cuss a man. Told him all about himself. Told him what a coward he was if he didn't get up. Dutch didn't get up. That Fijian would have killed him. I can't. I mean, Jesse Ventura and I were sitting there. Ricky Hunter, one of my best friends in the business was Johnny Eagles. So he wouldn't get up. Jimmy got dressed, had his match, and left. Now, you've never heard this story. Prior to that, Salem, Oregon was like a little spot show. It wasn't far from Portland, just right down the road. And we wrestled on a stage in like an old movie theater. The ring was on the stage. The fans sat out there like it was a movie in those type chairs. No ringside, no nothing. So we'd go down there and they'd guarantee you $35 back then. So I went to Elton, that was Don's brother. I said, Elton, how about Ed and I wrestle together with Skowski? I said, we had some good stuff in Kansas City. Matches. And these were long programs, like 6-week, 7-week programs. Turn them into every kind of match, chain match, cage match, tag matches, handicap, every kind of match you can imagine. I said, we did well with it. He said, yeah, kid, we'll do that. So that night, we came back, and the next week, we worked together. No, we worked together that night. That's the first time we'd worked together. I said, let us take it from here. Payoff is $35. Come back next week, house jump, $35. Next week, we come back, the payoff was $95. I told Ed, I said, we going to pack this place to the raft. Then we'll start turning it into other stuff. Dutch happened to be on the card that night. Guess who was on the main event the next week? Dutch and Wiskowski. It went back down to $35. Dutch had been out there for 40 years, right? They was having a coal miner's glove match. They had seen forever. Went right back down. Now, Ricky Hunter's on the card. So was Johnny Eagles. You know who Ricky Hunter is?
Yes.
They go have a party for Dutch. Appreciation party. It's me, my wife, Jesse Ventura, his wife, Ricky Hunter, his wife, Johnny Eagles, and his wife at Ricky Hunter's house. And Eagles has already told me what he's going to do. He's got this big, like, birthday cake made. White icing. And in yellow writing, it's going to say, thanks for everything that you've done for us Dutch. And in the middle of it, in the yellow icing, in the middle of the white icing, there's a yellow chicken. Did you hear what I said? I'm sitting there, I'm going to lose my job here tonight, man. This is going to get horrible. So we have the dinner. And Johnny Eagles, I don't know if you know his reputation. He didn't care about nothing. He can't wait to bring his cake out he had made. He brings it out, sets it in front of Dutch, turns it where he can read it. He gets teary-eyed. This Dutch gives this big speech, what the guys mean to him and to the wrestling in Oregon, this and this. They cut the cake and serve it. And so Dutch finally says, I got to use your restroom. He said, I got to pee. Ricky Hunter said, you're not pissing in my house. I'm going, oh, this is Ricky Hunter's bad egg, man. I said, this is fixing to go south. He said, what do you mean? He said, I wouldn't let you piss in my house. If you lived here for 5 years, you're not pissing in my house. And it got ugly. He said, I tell you what you do. You got to piss, get in your car and go home. He says, what you've done to all the guys around here. Because they cost them money. You know, just by that little episode he pulled with me and Wiskowski. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Then Johnny Eagles did some other stuff to him. I mean, brutal stuff. John, I'll tell you a quick giant story. We're in Seattle. Andre's out there for a week, right? Him and Johnny Eagles are playing cribbage in the dressing room. We used to play cribbage. That was our thing, cribbage, you know. So I'm sitting there watching them because they gambled. And so I'm watching this. I said, something wrong here, man. So Johnny's not beating him too bad, but he's beating him. I mean, they didn't play you like 4 or 5 hands. Johnny's beating him. He let Johnny get close and then pull away from him, you know, keep the giant in. So John said, I got to go pee. So he gets up. I said, Johnny, I said, I'm going to ask you one question. I said, how do you keep getting those cards? He said, I'm giving them to myself. I said, what? He said, I'm giving them to myself. I don't know this about him. I said, you're kidding me, man. Now I'm sitting there watching him. Don't see nothing. I said, Johnny, if that big man comes back here and catches you doing that, this was his exact words. He said, that big goof will never catch me. So that was that. So I when I came back to Georgia, I was telling Jody Hamilton about it. He said, you didn't know that about Eagles? He said, he's a mechanic with them cars.
Profitable.
Yeah, very profitable. So we're go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
We were in Seattle one night. Johnny and I stayed in a room. I didn't split rooms with many guys, but I did Johnny because we got along great. So he said, I'm going to get up about 2:00. I said, for what? Dutch had this gorgeous van with murals painted on both sides. It was gorgeous. He said, I bought some paint stripper with me. He gets up in the middle of the night, goes up. I'm watching him out the window, puts paint stripper on a towel and rubs it on both sides of that van where the murals are. He come out the next morning and stuff was run down the side. Dutch went berserk. He said, he's got to pay for what he did to us. That was Eagles' viewpoint. But Johnny was a good guy. He you know.
That's a good rib by the sounds of it. Wanted to ask you, speaking of Georgia and how hot Georgia was during the time frame, wanted to ask you about working with a very young Road Warriors.
Well, I had my gym, and I was still wrestling. You know, I would go back 3 or 4 days sometimes to Kansas City for a couple of months, and I'd go out for walks and come back, and I'd go different. I was going up to Detroit, and I was still doing a lot of wrestling, but I had my gym. That was when I started getting hurt, my knees hurt. I thought, hey, I can't do this forever. So my gym was good to me. I had every walk of life in that. Doctors, lawyers, judges, every walk of life in this gym. It was next to wrestling. That was my favorite thing in life. Thing, not person, thing in my life was that gym. But anyhow, Jake the Snake's doing the booking now. And I knew Jake when I was out there in Louisiana. And so he said, "You want to work some?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You want to work next Wednesday night in Columbus?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'll put you and Garvin together." I said, "Okay." He said, "Y'all be working with the Road Warriors." Well, I wasn't even watching wrestling at the time. So I watched it that Saturday. I said, "Good God." Jokers. So we get to Columbus, and everybody in my gym is there. They said, "We coming down here to watch you get your ass kicked." I mean, it was packed. It was packed. I was from Columbus, you know. Well, we beat them. Come back the next week for the title, beat them again. But I know I backed Hawk into a turnbuckle and built him. I said, "Head scissor," build him, gave him a head scissor. He saw me at TV in Atlanta. He said, "You know, I've never taken a head scissor before." I said, "I figured you could catch me. Big as you." He laughed. But they were green as grass now. They were something else, man. But then I was in Japan with them later on. I know Paul got hurt the same night. I separated my shoulder here in Columbus, and Paul tore his patella tendon. He stayed at my place with me until he got better, and you know, had his surgery. And he stayed at my house. But they changed. You know, they thought they were bigger than the game. They did. I mean, and you're not. Nobody. You may think that, but they will draw right on if you go. You know, it's been that way forever. You know, everybody thinks they're invincible or irreplaceable.
Yeah, and they sure revolutionized the tag team situation. But if they didn't sell for anybody, they were kind of a one-trick pony.
That was it. And I know in Japan, they watched them over there close in the ring, because you're not going to come over and eat their stars up. You know what I mean? They put them in there like Jumbo, but Jumbo could handle itself. And maybe Yatsu, not Yatsu, but Tenru, guys that could handle themselves. And Joe Iguchi, you know who Joe Iguchi was? He was always in the ring. Joe could handle himself.
Yes.
Do you know about Joe Iguchi and Victor Rivera?
No, sir.
You know who Victor Rivera was?
Yes.
I wasn't on this tour. Stan Hansen told me. Stan and I were very close. He said, "Victor's on this tour." Well, I always thought it was an honor to be asked to go over there. The money was unbelievable. You're treated like royalty, stay in 5-star hotels, travel first class. Everything's first class. Your money's going to be there when your tour's over, whatever you agree to. So Victor Rivera's on that bus. It was a beautiful bus, had All Japan Pro Wrestling written on it. It was big like a Greyhound, but it was their bus. Like we travel together, and all the Japanese, the Funks, if they were over there, they travel with the Japanese guys. Me and Stan, and but not on this tour. Like Butcher would be on that. All of us would be on that one bus, Mascaras or whoever. So he said, Victor Rivera said on the bus, he said, "Hell with these slant-eyed people, these effing Japs." He said, "Victor, you better hold it down." Said, "Joe hears every word you're saying. He speaks English, fluent English." He said, but that's why Joe was on that bus, to keep law and order between us, you know. Because a lot of guys, they couldn't handle it over there. It's brutal. I mean, they work you to death. That's what you're there for. You go over there, I'd go over there weighing 245 pounds and come home weighing 2 1/4. You know, the food and the traveling and the work. He said, "I'm telling you, you keep this up. You keep this up." He did it again, but even worse. He said, "Joe Iguchi got out of that seat." He said, "I thought he was going to beat him to death." They sent him home that evening. You don't do something like that, man. Disrespect those people. Just, you know, just like the story with Brody, you know. Why that happened, only God in heaven knows why. A lot of reasons why. You know, I saw him mistreat guys in that ring, something horrible. I don't know if he did that to Jose Gonzalez. Wasn't that his name, Jose?
Invader One, yeah. Jose.
Yeah. I don't know if he did that to him somewhere down the road years ago. It was about money. I heard one story. Brody had invested money down there, and he told me when he went on that trip, he wasn't leaving unless he got his 25,000. I've heard that story. I don't know. Of course, Calvin was there, which is Dutch Mantell. He was there, and Butcher was there, and Atlas was there. But I don't know if anybody knows the real story. I don't know.
Don't think we ever will. Anthony is asking about a question that I actually had for you about world-class championship wrestling in terms of dealing with Kevin and his brothers and Fritz. I know you were brought in, what was it, 86 for the world-class tag tournament.
My brother and I, yeah.
Yeah. So what was the story behind that, and any insights working with or around the Von Erichs?
I'm glad you asked. And you want the truth?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to give you the truth. In 1973, I get a call from, I've been in the business 3 years. 1973, I get a call. I went out there in November or December or January. I think I started in January or February in 73. I get a call from Leo Garibaldi, who I knew. Him and my brother-in-law were very close. He said, "How's it going there in Georgia?" I said, "It's going good." He said, "I want to bring you to Texas, to Dallas." I said, "All right." He said, "I'm going to use you on top." He said, "Fritz is retiring." Like, okay. He said, he's wanting somebody that's going to, they'll be here for a while. He's going to retire and needs a replacement. How you going to replace him? But anyhow, so I go out there. First night there, I'm wrestling Blackjack Mulligan. First night. I got him rocking and rolling. All of a sudden, there's a guy sitting in the stands dressed in cowboy hat and cowboy club. It was Lanza. He hits the ring. I'm doing both of them, drop kicking them, boom, boom, slamming them, boom, boom, boom. They take a powder. People are screaming and hollering. I'm there 3 months. I'm not saying I got over. Leo got me over. I'm over like a fat rat in Dallas and Fort Worth. But see, I didn't know this. What I didn't like about it is like three territories in one. Monday and Tuesday was Dallas and Fort Worth. Those were Fritz's. Wednesday, you went to San Antonio. That was Joe Blanchard. Now, I don't know who was running Corpus Christi on Thursday. I don't know who ran that. And then Friday was Houston and Paul Bosch. So it was like, you're not going to be wrestling the same people I did in Dallas and Fort Worth when you go down to San Antonio and Corpus, and then you go to Houston. Houston was kind of run like St. Louis. Paul Bosch did his own thing. He used some of the Dallas guys. He brought guys in that wasn't in the territory, like Mascaras, Wahoo, Ernie Ladd, or whoever he wanted. It's his town, right? He's a good pay man too. So I'm there 3 months. Leo called me on a Wednesday morning. I was in Dallas the night before. He said, "You're in San Antonio tonight, right?" He didn't go. He didn't do any booking. Leo didn't do any booking down there for Blanchard. Blanchard did his own. I said, "Yeah." He said, leave about an hour early and come by the arena. I said, "Okay." I said, "All right." I said, "I'll be down there at whatever time, 1:30 or whatever it was." I said, "I'm supposed to get my notice." So I get down there to the Sportatorium. I think that's what they call it. I go in there. He said, "Come on, let's go out there in the arena." So we went out there and sat in the bleachers. He said, "You got any idea why I called you down here?" I said, "Yeah, I got an idea, Leo." He said, "Why did I call you down here?" I said, "Fritz wants you to get rid of me." He said, "That's right." He said, "Do you have any idea why?" I said, "Well, you asked me, and I'm going to tell you." I said, "Not me. You got me over." And I said, "He can't stand it." He said, "You're exactly right." He said that he hears that, "Go, Jerry, go," instead of "Go, Fritz." Go. He said, "That's who he is." And he said, "You have no idea how bad I feel." He said, "I brought you out here." He said, "You've been here 3 months. You did everything I asked you to do. You got over. You got me over. You put me in a position to do that." And I left, came back to Georgia. But then we got Gary Hart was doing the booking out there when they had that tournament. And my brother and I flew back out for that. I saw Fritz. I didn't even speak to him in the dressing room.
Mhm.
He didn't look at me either, you know.
In terms of
Can I do another Fritz thing?
oh, please.
Do you know about Fritz when David died in Japan?
And the whole memorial show and making making a lot of money from it, trying to profit from it, that deal.
I trained the guy.
Covering up the time of death, covering up the cause of death.
Yeah, that was a cover up. I had trained the guy in my gym that worked at my gym forever. I trained several guys, trained Marty Jannetty, trained a lot of guys. So I trained this guy that worked with me at my gym. He went to Japan. I got 3 guys that worked. 2 of them worked for me, and one of them was just a member. I got all three of them booked in Japan, and they thank me to this day for that. So this one kid I got, he called me on a Sunday morning. He said, I answered the phone about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. He said, Jerry, he's dead. I said, who is this? I said, is this you, Thomas? Yeah. He said, David Von Erich's dead. We found him dead. Oh my God. They went up their pills or everywhere, they said. From the time they landed till that next afternoon when they was going to do TV the first time in Tokyo, nobody saw him. He's dead. Killed himself. Now, I'm telling you, the story he told to me came straight from the man himself, Joe Higuchi. They called Fritz, told him he's dead. And they asked him, was he going to come over here and get the body? He said, no. Joe Higuchi had to, tell you how those Japanese people are. He escorted that body back over here on it was in a big 747, but he came back with the body. Joe Higuchi. They unloaded David. He caught the next thing back to Tokyo. That's what kind of people they are. The man wouldn't even go get his own son. Just to see what went on or happened.
Wow.
But made money off of it.
Mm-hmm. Were you surprised? I know you had some interactions, or correct me if I'm wrong, some work with Kevin Von Erich. Were you surprised that he always seemed to defend Fritz to the end? It seems.
Which Von Erich are you talking about?
Kevin.
I was only in a tag match with him one night in Kansas City. We wrestled 2 Japanese. I think it might have been Yasu Fuji and Oki Shikina. I think we wrestled them. I think. That could be wrong, but he was so buzzed up, man. He was so out of it. So he's doing all kind of crazy stuff. He's barefooted, which that don't matter. He's doing all kind. I'm watching this. Reckless stuff. He went to drop an elbow on one of them. And when he come up, he covered him completely. The back of his head landed in that guy's face, and his body, he just like laid on him. We got back, and that Japanese guy's nose was bleeding and all. We got back to it. I said, what are you doing, man? You know what the man told me? I hope I never see you or talk to you ever again if he didn't tell me this. I said, how did you land on him like that? He said, man, the air conditioner blew me over. I never talked to him again. You out there working with somebody, could have you upside down and walk out from under you or something, man. That's no respect. Bill Watson didn't care for that crowd. They were out of hand, man. They were out of control. I don't think they liked him, their dad. I think he made them. I heard they didn't want to care nothing about all that crap. He made them. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seemed that I don't know if you saw the Iron Claw movie that came out a couple of years ago, but it seemed to produce a very kind of romanticized version of the family. I mean, it was historically very inaccurate, but touched on some things, but didn't really get into just how reckless and sometimes messed up the brothers were in the ring.
Yeah, they I don't know. I don't know if they were spoiled brats or made to do what they did, or I don't know. All my traveling, except when I was with my brother, not every trip. I mean, there were guys I liked and trusted, but if I was in a territory and didn't like that, I traveled by myself. I'm not getting caught up in your madness, your dopeness, or your drinking and driving, or I just had too much respect for what I did. I'm not going to jail on account of you with some dope. When I told you what Milo told me about keeping my mouth shut, Leo Garibaldi told me the story. Him and my brother-in-law started at the same time. They started when they were 17 years old. And Leo said they were in Baltimore. They were 18 years old, both of them 18 years old. And my brother-in-law, I mean, he had issues, but he was a fantastic worker. Looked good, looked the part, could do anything in the ring, smooth as silk. He said he's 18. He's out there watching a guy about 30 years old watching this guy's match. He said, when the guy came back, my brother-in-law was waiting for him at the door. And he explained to that guy everything he did wrong. And Leo's sitting there saying, I can't believe he's doing this. Told the guy everything he did wrong. So the guy got hot. He said, but what Dickie told him was the truth. But he said, the things you don't do. That's the way he was. He was something else. He was something else.
Speaking of guys with a reputation for partying hard, you had some matches with Ted DiBiase against the Freebirds, who were, of course, a staple of world class in their glory years. Do you have any memories of working them?
Yeah, I had a lot of matches with them here in Georgia, my brother and I. A lot of matches with them. In fact, we drew a lot of money with them. The best thing that Watts ever did was get Michael Hayes out of the ring. He's the one that did that. He could talk now, but his work, but Buddy was the hoss of that team. Buddy Roberts was the hoss. There's another sad example about Terry Gordy. Had it made in Japan. I'm talking about, and then I think they had to put him in the hospital when he got there one time.
I think it was on the way back he overdosed, and as a result of the delay, I guess he was over the ocean, and the delay resulted in brain damage by the time they got him to the hospital.
Yeah. I saw that thing they did on Dark Side of the Ring. He was never all there, I don't think, after that. Why? Why? Started when he was super young, got to make that big money in Japan. That's all he had to do. Like pretty much Hanson did. That's he wound up being his big paydays. But I never understood that. I thank God I didn't. That just wasn't my thing. I just had too much respect for what I was doing. I've seen guys get in the ring drunk, smoked up. It's like anywhere else, anything else, And it's not. You can't blame the business. We all have choices. We all have choices.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that's the choice you make, then you got to live with it. Mm-hmm. The way I see it. And I just didn't choose to do that. I did not choose to do that.
Thank goodness. I also noticed in '91 you did a match, a syndicated TV match, teaming with Steve Lombardi, Brooklyn Brawler, against the Rockers. One of whom you've talked about training, Marty.
That was my brother. That was my brother.
Oh, was it? Okay.
That was in Macon.
Okay.
I think it was in Macon. Yeah.
How did that come together?
They called my brother. Who called him? Was it Briscoe, Jerry Briscoe, or they called him? It was going to be in Macon. Then my brother lived in Macon. They called him, told him to come down there. So we got down there, and they wanted my brother to sign a bunch of stuff. He said, "I'm not signing nothing." He said, "I didn't call y'all." And Jerry Briscoe told him, he said, "I told you wasn't going to sign this stuff." He said, I go home. I didn't call y'all. Y'all called me. You want me to sign this kind of release, for like if they put it on some, I don't know what McMahon had cooked up. He said, I am not signing that. When they didn't, they let him wrestle. But Marty was a good piece of talent, but then he was self-destructing. Mm-hmm. Bad. Good piece of talent.
Was there ever any interest in you in doing further work with them? It seemed like syndicated work on television really wasn't fitting of a guy of your stature at that time.
This was in late 80s. Jesse was working for him, Ventura. I knew Jesse well. So I said, man, I'd like to go over and make some shots for him. But I didn't know that, So I called Jesse. He said, man, you don't want to come up here? I said, yeah, I'd like to come up here for a little bit. I had my gym and I'm doing good. And I figured it'd be good for my gym business, me being on WWF, can't hurt nothing. So sure enough, I get a call on a Friday. It was Pat Patterson. Yeah, this is Pat. I said, yeah. He said, Jesse said you're interested in coming. He said, look, he said, I said, yeah, I'd be interested in coming to work there. He said, I need you in Detroit tonight. I said, I can't do it. I said, I got a bodybuilding show I'm putting on tomorrow night. I said, yeah, I'll work on that thing about 6 months out of the year. All right, well, he said, I'll send you a round trip ticket. I said, Pat, I appreciate it, but I cannot. I got a show tomorrow night, bodybuilding show. I got a lot of money invested in that. All right, but then I never called him back. Gordon Soley told me one time when Turner was running that, WCW up there, is that what they called it?
World Championship Wrestling?
Yeah, Soley. I'd known Gordon since I started. And he'd come here several times to have surgeries. Dr. Andrews, who was the surgeon here that operated on everybody, Gordon had gone to him, and I took him up there, and I'd take him to his appointment. He'd fly in here from Tampa. He told me, he said, if you used to come up there, that center stage, and watch what goes on and open your bag, what goes on, he said, I know you. He said, you would fold your bag and walk out of there, get in your car and go home. He said, it's the most screwed up, unbelievable thing you've ever had. Jim Hurd running it. That would be like, you heard of him.
Yes,
sir. They got him. That would be like you giving me one of those stealth bombers and say, here, it's yours. I wouldn't even know how to start it. I can't fly a plane anyhow. What good does that do? He said, he said, it's nothing that you've ever seen, how they do. So that would have been a good thing. When Bill Watts had come there, if they left him alone, then a horse was different. Did you know Brad Armstrong told me he was making? Now Brad told me this himself. I knew Brad from the time he was a little boy. He said, I got a contract, $75,000 a year. I wrestle one time a month. Did you hear what I said? You do the math. See how much that is a match. Watts cut all that crap out. They went crazy.
Yeah, I from what I've read and gathered, speaking to people that were there, his no nonsense style didn't really get over with that generation at the time in WCW.
What happened? They'd never seen money like that, the guys. And when Bill come in there, look, I don't care. I met Ted Turner one time. I was at the very beginning when we went from, I think it was ABC there in Atlanta, Channel 10 or Channel 11, when I first started here in Georgia. We went to cable. They started talking about cable TV. We said, what? Cable TV? We know what they're talking about. Ted Turner wanted it. Well, he would tell people all his life, if it hadn't been for wrestling, TBS wouldn't have made it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was the hottest show he ever had. So when they kicked Ann out after she folded, she called me and wanted to know if she started promoting, would I help her? I said, yeah, my brother and I help you. She said, I'm gonna get a meeting with Ted Turner. All those years I wrestled at TBS, I never saw the man ever. We got an appointment. went to TBS. He's sitting in there chewing tobacco with his feet on his desk, spitting in the garbage can. Laid back guy. He wanted wrestling. That's when McMahon wanted to put a tape in there. He didn't want that. He wanted, we'd come up with a deal. We'd do the taping at Georgia Tech, blah, 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 blah. Told him what we would do. He said, let's do it. I never heard, we had never heard nothing else from it. You know, just, but what I'm getting at, if that kept on, like, I don't care how much money Ted Turner had. I don't care. You're not going to keep throwing it away. Not that amount of money every month, or every week. I mean, and Watts was a businessman like Oates. They knew that well had a bottom to it too. And I think in fact, who was I talking to about that yesterday? Another guy that I've done a podcast for, Tony Richards. You know Tony?
No.
He's a historian out of Columbia, Missouri. I was telling him that I talked to Watts, and I said, you know, if Watts had taken that over, I said, it might have been a horse of a different color. But Watts was a smart businessman. He knew the business. It could, we'll never know. But what happened? Flair and all them guys that were getting that heavy, they went to that herd and said, you got to get rid of this guy. I'm surmising that's what happened. He cut those contracts out, man. Ain't nobody spend this kind of money. I mean, Elon Musk ain't gonna spend money like that and ain't getting nothing back on it. You know, I mean, it's business. And you got to spend money to make money. I understand that, but you can't throw it away.
And eventually, it was the undoing, except for a few very profitable years. Jerry, I really appreciate your time this afternoon. It's been fascinating. I feel like we could do several more podcasts, but for now, I want to ask you, and this can be a difficult question, but from the historical perspective, what would you like to be remembered by? And importantly, given some of the things that we've talked about, I know you've not only been in ring trained, you ran a promotion, et cetera, basically done it all. What advice would you give to those that want to be in the business today based on your experiences?
That wants to be in the business today. It's you know, to make a living at it, if you're not trained by them, you're not getting in, you know. And just to do it, just to say you do it, I know I've seen it a lot, heard a lot of guys say, I'm a professional wrestler. If you're a professional at anything, that means you make your living doing it. You're a professional baseball player, a golfer, or a professional race car driver. You know, I had a guy that approached me the other day about training him, and I said, you could never get your money back for what I would charge you. I said, I can train you, but I said, that's not fair to you, and I'm not going to do it. I gave him a figure. He said, well, then he come back and I said, I'm still not going to do it. You would never recoup this money. You know, it's something, not because I was there and did it. It's just a thing that you can go do it, but it's not worth it. You could get involved in something else that would be much more rewarding. To me, there's no more reward to doing it. You know, if you're not up there now, you don't know if you can be there from one day to the next. And it's like I said, from the late to mid 50s to the end of the 80s, that's when it was at its peak for everybody, you know. So I would just say I wouldn't advise anybody to do it. You pay a physical price. I've had, just like everybody else, I've had 10 surgeries. I've had 7 knee surgeries, 2 total knees replaced, a shoulder replaced, elbow surgery. I paid a price, but I do it again. In my day, if it was still like my day to day, I would be more than happy to train guys. They would at least have a chance, but there's no opportunity anymore. And I would recommend, it's not sour grapes. It's just a different time. It's a different era, and it's a different product, you know. And up there's only one place to go. When I did it, as you opened up territories, there were territories everywhere, and you had a chance. And that's the way I looked at it when I started. I said, if some of these guys got I got just as good a chance as they do. If I put what I think I need to in it, and I want to be remembered by, if I wrestle in front of 18,000 people or 300 people, I gave the same effort every night because they paid their money to be entertained by wrestling. I didn't shortchange any town or any amount of fans anywhere. I gave it my all because that's who I was.
Well, I really, really appreciate your time today, Jerry. Just so the fans know, I know you have a Facebook. Do you have any other, can you give out your Facebook or any other ways that they can contact you?
Just Jerry Oates on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. That's about it.
Well,
people can reach out to me. I don't mind. I don't mind.
I was going to say, I appreciated when I contacted you. You were very approachable, and certainly, again, this interview did not disappoint. We'll keep in touch and perhaps do another one down the road. But until then, thanks again.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you having me. And if you ever want to do it again, I'll be more than happy to do it with you.
Well, fans, that's it for this edition of the Cheap Heat Productions flagship show, the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. Please like this video if you've enjoyed it, and also subscribe to the channel. We continue to grow based on great, unique, classic pro wrestling content such as this. Once again, thanks to the legendary Jerry Oates. I'm Jack Kilby. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Cheap Heat Productions. Don't forget to hit the notification button and you won't miss any of our upcoming interviews, recurring programs, or entertainment products. Thanks again and keep watching.